Months later, after wandering in the dark, seething in the church pew, grieving the loss of a version of herself she missed but couldn't get back to, another option finally opened to her. In that grief counselor's office that day, I made my decision. I choose trust. Not a trust that God willed Helen's cancer or death, but a trust that God is good, that God is present in our suffering, that God will make all things new. Jenna and I both sat in silence with tear-stained faces. Somehow the tiny office in that bustling co-working space had become as holy as the most ornate chapel. I don't and never could understand everything about God, but I can trust the God who is revealed in Jesus, the God who has never looked down on suffering from a lofty throne, but has always looked into the eyes of the suffering from level ground. I can trust the God who refuses to offer platitudes from a safe distance, the God who descends into the mess with me. All the biblical highlights, the moments of God's glorious interventions, were preceded by someone choosing trust. The subtext behind every miracle, the soundtrack beneath the life of every saint, is a defiant and courageous choice in the face of the dark experience of God's absence and silence. I choose trust. C.S. Lewis names this choice as the Great Defiance from which redemption springs. Our, Satan and his minions, cause is never more in danger than when a human, no longer desiring but still intending to do our enemy's will, looks round upon a universe from which every trace of him seems to have vanished, and asks why he has been forsaken, and still obeys. Acts 12 tells the incredible story of Peter's supernatural deliverance from prison. He gets thrown into jail for his faith in Jesus, has a public execution date set for the next day. Meanwhile, the church gathers at somebody's house, holds an all-night prayer meeting, and in the wee hours of the morning, Peter shows up at that very prayer meeting. As it turned out, God was listening and doing the miraculous. He opened a locked cell in the middle of the night and guided Peter from shackles to freedom so he could rejoin the church family that had been asking on his behalf. That's the headline. It's the story everyone remembers from Acts 12, and it's a good one. But I'm not interested in the headline. I'm caught up in the subtext. It was about that time that King Herod arrested some who had belonged to the church. Intending to persecute them, he had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. When he saw that this met with approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. Acts chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. God miraculously freed Peter, but James was unjustly executed. Why? Why did God respond miraculously to prayer for Peter, but silently to prayer for James? Both of these men were in his inner circle, his core 3 disciples, so it wasn't that he favored one over the other. Surely the church prayed for both. If they gathered for an all-night prayer meeting for Peter, it's safe to assume they responded in the same way for James. Both were arrested and imprisoned by the same corrupt tyrant for the same unjust cause, perhaps even occupied the same jail cell. So why, God? Why let James die if you have the power to teleport Peter to safety? I don't know. That's the only honest response. Here's what I do know. God works slowly out of compassion, not apathy. I know God puts up with a ton of corruption, and his slow, loving way of redemption asks of us patience and endurance in suffering. I know that when I read Acts, I see a seasoned, resilient faith, a praying people who dance with God through miracles and bear with God through mystery. Lost in the background of the action sequences and miraculous montages of Acts is this: a community that gathered to pray, even after they had tried it once before, only to watch darkness win, at least from their point of view. They kept on praying in the face of unanswered prayer. They persisted in prayer. Where does that come from? Only from the belief that God is bottling up my tears and saving them right next to my prayers. That both are key ingredients in the recipe of redemption. that He loves me too much to let either go to waste? Can we become again a persistently praying kind of people? Can we recover the legacy of our ancient ancestors lost somewhere along the way? Can we preserve it, enflesh it in our bodies, express it in our lives? Keep on asking, and it will be given to you. Keep on seeking, and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be opened to you. That's the invitation Jesus offered us. And anyone who takes Him up on it and prays this way long enough will eventually find themselves on the doorstep of resilience.